welcome back. To introduce the evaluator number 2 for the speaker, Scott Oliver. So the evaluator of Scott's speech is Pat Caslin. Welcome, Pat, to introduce the speaker and the speech purpose, please.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, we have Scott Oliver, and I will give you a little intro to Scott in a second. The objectives of this speech, it's from the Dynamic Leadership Path, Level 1 speech. It's about vocal variety, demonstrating proficiency in vocal variety and body language. Long-term success in any career takes more than training and desire. It takes specific tactics to keep you on track. In today's speech, Scott is going to share 2 of those tactics with his 3rd speech in dynamic leadership. This is Scott Oliver with non-negotiables and tolerations, 2 sides of the same coin. Non-negotiables and tolerations, 2 sides of the same coin. Scott Oliver.
Thank you, Pat. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and honored guest. In my favorite Christmas movie of all time, a 1988 cult classic, it's called Die Hard. The evil master in the movie says, when Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds left to conquer. Well, like the rest of the movie, the quote was fiction. It was wrong, but it still carries the point. If those among you have achieved all that you want to achieve in life, the next 5 to 7 minutes, you can blank your screen and go get a cup of coffee. For the rest of us that are still have a few mountains to climb, a few tactics might help you with that. And today I want to talk about 2 of them. Hopefully, by the fruition of this speech, you'll understand tolerations and non-negotiables. Now, both non-negotiables and tolerations deserve some definitions. And so if I could, I'd like to set aside the non-negotiables for a moment and just talk about tolerations. Tolerations are those things, arguably, that we put up with, that we tolerate. They could be situations like a messy drawer in your kitchen or a sock drawer that you haven't cleaned out in years. It could be a dirty garage. It could be a behavior of yours or other people. It could be the people you're hanging around. A friend of mine told me once, you know, Scott, people only change when the pain is hard enough. That struck me, and it struck me right between the eyes a few years later. You see, I wasn't very good at being on time. And sometimes I'd show up late for dinner. One day I was working with a client, and frankly, I could have left a lot sooner. And my wife's grandmother was really, really sick. And my wife wanted to go see her. I got home 30, 40 minutes late. And when we left, it took about 20 minutes to get to Grandma's house. And when we got there, the ambulance was there. The lights were off, and the ambulance pulled away. Now, I'm convinced my wife has forgiven me, but I've never forgiven myself. So when the pain gets deep enough, you have to look at the tolerations and say to yourself, oh Lord, a change has to take place. Another friend of mine told me that, Scott, if you're going to be referable in your business, there are 4 rules that you have to live by, 4 non-negotiables. Number 1, you got to be on time. No kidding. Number 2, you got to do what you say you're going to do. Number 3, you need to finish what you start. And most of all, number 4, the number 4 non-negotiable of being referable is to say please and thank you. Simple manners. So I began to learn about the things that you couldn't negotiate anymore, that you had to be on time. Oddly enough, one of my favorite football coaches, American football, arguably, for you folks over on the other side of the pond, was a guy named Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi used to say, if you are 5 minutes early, you're already 15 minutes late. To this day, if you walk down Lombardi Avenue outside of the stadium there in Green Bay, Wisconsin, you'll notice that your watch doesn't match the clocks because they're all set 15 minutes fast. In fact, my watch is set 10 minutes fast. I'm not late anymore. So, fellow Toastmasters, when we talk about tolerations, make yourself a list. Here's your solution. Take out a legal pad and write a list of things you're putting up with. Start with the easy stuff and start every weekend and say, what am I not going to tolerate anymore? It may mean you're cleaning the garage this weekend or raking the leaves. It may mean you're going to stop hanging out with somebody that every time you hang out with them, you wake up the next morning with a hangover. It may mean you're going to start finding people in your life and having a non-negotiable new relationship where it's give and take and it goes both ways. You have to decide, fellow Toastmasters, if you are going to tolerate your situation or the flip side of the coin, you're going to have some non-negotiables. Fellow Toastmasters.
Thank you, Scott. I like your non-negotiable, especially number one, timing, be on time. Thank you very much.
Introduce our next evaluator, Pat Caslin. Pat, you're up.
Thank you very much, Madam General Evaluator. Ladies and gentlemen, we saw today somebody who wanted to change the way we do things in a way that was going to be good for us and positive in our lives. The purpose of this speech was clear. It was to change us. And in many ways, I was changed. And I was changed with the simplicity of the call to action, which is to ask me, what am I tolerating that I could change that would be good for me? This was superb. Could I relate to that? Yes, I could. Because Scott is somebody that tells a story and told this story in a way that I could feel part of that story. How often have we been late home for our spouse and we've missed something? And there was poignancy in that miss, in that the ambulance pulled away. We didn't find out what happened to grandmother, but the emotion in his voice conveyed the sense of loss. And I felt that, and that was powerful. These were the really strong parts of this speech. Let me give you some suggestions maybe for improvement on it, Scott. I don't think you need to open with ladies and gentlemen and Madam Toastmaster and all that, because you then follow that with a talk, something about Alexander the Great and conquering the world. And again, I expected the speech at the end to pick up that reference somewhere, but it was left out there hanging, and I was wondering, where do we pick that up? Where does that get rounded off in the speech? And I thought that's something that could have, and there is a quote that you could have used on that, I think that could have really rounded that off very strongly in this context. You used only 5 minutes of your time, and yet you didn't talk about the non-negotiables in any depth, I felt. So there was 2 minutes to use there, and I think that could have been really, really well used. The body language and vocal variety aspects of this speech, I thought were appropriate, and we overplay the body language and the vocal variety, in my opinion, because they should be appropriate to the context of the speech. And they were, because we saw Scott use his finger, saying that 4 things that he was told. We saw him take the coin flip, two sides of the same coin. So they were well used. But one thing I would say is have a look at maybe your camera angle, because you were way up here, and it's kind of hard to look at somebody speaking when you're looking up at them or looking down at them. And if you can sort the camera angle, it's much better. Now, equally, a great speech is a conversation, and this had conversational aspects to it, really powerful conversational aspects. And for conversation, you want to feel that the speaker's in front of you. And the camera angle didn't make it feel like that. Fabulous speech, wonderful connection, really enjoyed it. Some things to work on.
Thank you so much, Pat.